What's up, everybody? Welcome back.
For anybody who's joining us anywhere for the last 50 minutes, we had
We
a
were
techno
jibber jabbering on
and after like
for
7 minutes,
a while there, yeah.
oh yeah, we had like a
And
great conversation. You guys had to miss,
but you
but
guys only saw like 10 minutes of it. For some reason, the stream just shut down.
yeah, so we decided instead of moving on to episode 11, we really should do a
Recap.
recap on 1 through 10, and
We had talked about doing
yeah,
this between the two of us ourselves at some point. That it would be cool to do a recap every 10 episodes to help test our own
mhm,
understanding, make sure that we're keeping everything, and to also help enable all of you a chance to be able to catch up with the show, with the series, and yeah, because we're sharing it for a reason.
yep.
I find it pretty compelling. I find it really not just informative but heartening to be able to get a grasp on why we are where we are at this point in history. So yeah, last episode was on consciousness, and the next episode that we're going to be getting into, I guess now next week, because it does seem
Mhm.
that the universe is telling us just do the
Yeah,
recap.
do the recap.
So we're back now.
So we're gonna have a
Yeah,
discussion on what we've learned over the past 10 episodes, and probably a little bit
yeah,
of like how we're applying the lessons to our own life. At least I'm going to talk a little bit about that because I'm
cool.
constantly like, if it's good relevant information that's useful, I'm applying it as
Hmm.
best as I can. uh, it's that compulsion to become more optimized and better and have a better understanding and be able to get a grasp of
Hmm.
things. And there's no point in like learning things if you're not going to directly apply them,
Yes,
particularly things like this.
really, truly.
Now learn your algebra and all that other stuff because
That's the
eventually you'll
great
apply it.
call,
But
and I
yeah,
mean it's a call to the courageous. It's hard to face what's going on in the world today. It's hard to even get a sense of what one can do in times like these, not just in a way that is helpful, but to feel at ease and comfort in this world. How should we be planning our future? How should we be raising our children in this condition where the world is at this ever accelerating rate of change, and all of the prevailing institutions and belief systems, even religious and spiritual, that we used to all trust in and carry on together, have now been thrown in doubt because we've become ever more awakened as a species to how things operate materially, and we cast our myths into a space of just pure superstition in our scientific framing, and we become super rational, or not even super rational, we become anti-rational almost, because
yeah,
we are closing ourselves off to whole worlds of things such as higher states of consciousness.
yeah, and
Why does the human being have these experiences?
well, I guess like in a biological sense, if we are just piloted vessels for DNA, it's because it's beneficial for evolution and the prolongment of life. It's no coincidence that
For a species to
we have
continually
become
awaken.
the way we have. Isn't that the goal of life, is to become the optimal organism?
It seems to be. Yeah, it seems to that life orders itself into higher and higher states of symbiosis on great levels, vast levels, such as planetary and cosmic. And how or why it's doing that is something that we can wonder towards, but we can directly experience the very nature of existence itself prior to our interpretations of it, prior to our thinking of it. Just the very actual raw sensory input as it comes in through
Mm-hmm.
the senses can be, you can be with it and abide with it in such a way that this, we call this meditation, that you deepen your sense of presence of the present moment, and you can be more present in all moments of life. And this actually enables you to do better in this thing called the flow state, when we're in this sense of at one ment, which you can also experience when you're worship is turned outward to the wonder of this great world that we are actually all a part of. We are all constitute of the elements that make up the stars of this
Mm-hmm.
universe, that make up the planets, that make up the beings that crawl atop them. So now we are these things, these earthlings, these
Yeah. Yeah.
extensions of Earth, and we are trying to figure out how to manage ourselves as we are starting to disbelieve all of the old prevailing myths and fight over all of our ideological opinions and our ways of viewing the world, fighting over which are right. And
And it almost
it's a time where we should be hopefully learning to manage with one another in a mode of conciliation. Okay, how can we best operate together to be the stewards that we have the potential to be?
yeah, and so when it comes to like myths, I think we're disregarding the lessons within the old myths and in some ways perverting them to make our own myths now to justify what we're doing now,
Mm-hmm.
opposed to using a myth to understand something that can't be directly talked about.
Any other way?
Now we're
Yeah.
using myth, like these new myths that we're creating to justify why we're doing or why we are the way we are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean like why the way we naturally are. I mean like the paths that we go down through, like ideologies. Like, are you using your myths to learn, or are you using your myths to empower your ideology?
Hmm.
And I think we're using our myths to empower our ideology as opposed to gain understanding and wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Because
It's okay to have ideas and
well, sure,
belief systems,
well,
but when we become so ideologically possessed by them
yeah.
that we are not willing to look outside of our ideology to further continually inform our ideology, because that's what we
Yeah.
should hopefully be doing if we want to
Well,
be in
we all have
concert with
ideologies.
reality, is continually upgrading and reinforming it
Yeah,
as we learn new things.
but we all have ideologies.
Yeah,
We
for
or
sure.
excuse me, rather, we all possess ideologies, but we shouldn't be possessed
By them. There you go. That's
by
a good
them.
way to say that. Just like we all have personalities,
Yeah,
but we shouldn't mistake our true self for our ideas of ourselves, for the cast image, for the personage that we hold in our heads about ourselves that we get to act through
mm-hmm.
in this world. And much of it is intrinsic to us when we're born, certain aspects of our dispositionality. But even that can be overcome as the brain is so much more software. Our sense of consciousness is so much more the product of how we operate through our software than it is through the hardware now.
Mm-hmm.
It's so malleable in that way that it processes.
Well, and also any software is input and output. You input information, and if it's good information, your output's going to be good.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to be all grumpy pants or nothing, but I think we're inputting a lot of really bad information, and we're having trouble parsing out the bullshit.
We
you
are.
know?
And that's the crux of the awakening from the meaning crisis.
And we know it's not good for us, because whether we acknowledge it or not, because we can feel it. It's like something we're doing and something we're not doing is wrong. This collective anxiety and angst that we're feeling is trying to tell us something. That's the point of anxiety in these emotions and sensations. Like, the point of pain is not to suck. The point of pain is to let you know
Right.
there's something wrong.
We're in a time of mass disagreement
Yeah.
and conflict amongst the prevailing institutions, the government, and the different
Yeah.
other organizational powers.
Well, and in order to parse out what is wrong, like what's wrong with the system, in the idea of everything as being the body and the body
Mm-hmm.
system. In order to parse that out, you have to gain wisdom and work through that so you can make wise choices.
Yes,
You know,
because
'cause-
some of these old traditions are tried and true for a reason. Because they've been tried over a long period of time, we found them to be reliable. So you got to find out, what's the pattern there. Why is this thing reliable
Yeah.
to us as a species? Because that's what myths are. When we look at what myths actually serve for humanity, why are all the human beings writing myths? Well, Vervaeke teaches and shows us that these myths contain perennial patterns. These are recurring
Mm-hmm.
patterns that are timeless almost for us as a human
And
culture, and
universal
that help us manage our
between.
conflicts and our deep existential traumas and trials and tribulations that we face as living, self-reflective, self-aware organisms. How can we best actualize ourselves to be in congruence with reality and one another? And and so this idea of awakening from the meaning crisis is the great work for us as humans in this time, that at least become aware of it, one could say.
Well, and perhaps this.
And we have to help steer the ship away from the whirlpool and towards new horizons.
And perhaps this meaning crisis that we're attempting to awaken from is not necessarily just a new thing either, because it seems like there's been this constant conversation throughout the ages, from back to the pre-pagan shaman earth worshipping, all the way through
Druids.
into the axial revolutions of the East and the West.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this crisis of meaning. It's like we've been going through it, and now it's happening so fast. It's like at this pinnacle peak, and we're at this another interesting tipping point, another axial revolution of our own.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thousands of years removed from the last one, but
Yes.
still very.
But we're in the midst of such a fundamental shift for our species that it is on par with something Bronze Age level,
Mm-hmm.
greater than the collapse of Rome, far greater.
Yeah, and it's interesting.
But we need a revolution. We need an actual revolution,
Mm-hmm.
so that we don't have a collapse of that
Yeah.
level.
Yeah, and it's interesting looking back at
So it would happen around the world. Yeah, it'd be concurrent. Sorry to cut you off. You were saying it's interesting now.
It's interesting that we can go back and we can read things from 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago. And even though the small portions of it, say like the cultural precepts, I guess,
Presuppositions.
like within that period of time may be different than ours now, are different, we can still be a part of that conversation and still relate to it. You can relate to being somebody who left Plato's cave.
Yes.
You can relate to watching, like in the case of Plato watching Aristotle.
Where our genetics are tuned to that world, this new world
Yeah.
where we have smartphones and smart devices and
But we're
action
still
on
telling
this.
the same stories and having the same conversation, though. Like even
Right.
the technology may be different and may be happening faster, but we're still telling the same stories, and we're still like developing our own heroes and our own, like for good or for bad, our own myths that are helping us, come to terms. Like I said this in episodes in the past, like memes are like modern day like little mini myths. They're encoded information within like two pictures in very small wordage, but what that meme means is because you have a cultural understanding of everything that led up to that meme.
Yeah. This is the way poetry and stories have worked for ages. So the meme is a great storytelling device, and you can say a lot in one frame with a few captions.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we're, or at least I'm saying, but I think it's actually really a trend. Is there's this embracing of old, I won't say cultural identities, but cultural practices, whether it's in music or art or philosophy and other things, where people are going back, and it's very impactful for people. Like like that band Heilung, they're resurrecting a dead language, and they're doing a shamanic ritual,
we're getting into the
and breaking people through. And I'm not of that time, but when I listen to that stuff, my skin puckers up and the hairs stand up, and it's like.
Yeah, people are revisiting the 60s, 70s, and 80s, but they're also going deep into ancient culture as well, like Heilung, and that's really fascinating to see.
Well, and even we're going back to understand what we're going through now. We've had to go back all the way to, the pre-pagan, pagan, up into the natural philosophers and all that stuff, and discuss all that stuff. And so we're revisiting it again, and it's I think Vervaeke said this in the first episode, but the future informing the past,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what we're constantly doing. And it gives me hope to see that people are being very creative with this, because we need it. And it's not going to all come from one place. It's not going to be just this one thing. I think it's going to be all the traditions are going to start coming up, and then we're going to start sifting out what works and what doesn't on a massive level between all of them.
Yeah, and we're going to see a great interweaving and vastly growing understanding of one another's different mythos, all the different cultural myths, and how they actually can correlate and work well together, where they complement one another and interweave, and where they actually inform us in new ways,
Mm-hmm.
each independently of one another. And you can see that there's great wisdom in the mystical Christian to the mystical Judaist to the mystical Buddhist to on and on and on.
Even the earth worshipping religions,
Mm-hmm.
of all around the world, have some extremely deep wisdom. Maybe it's not entirely all correct, but it's more correct as far as like giving you an understanding of the world and how to work within it.
How to adapt to the
Mm-hmm.
environment. It still works. Yeah, even if it's not scientifically accurate as
Yeah.
far as the beliefs of how things
Yeah.
began or where they came from or this or that.
Well, and that may be one thing
But
that,
there's some deep truth in some of those things too.
yeah,
That we
well,
then end
sure.
up reconfirming later on.
Yeah, it's like the truth of, like say the archetypical old man on the farm. He's a simple man. Doesn't seem to be thinking about much, but he's got a grasp and understanding of, the world and how it is, and is at ease with it, and can say something so profound yet so simple.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Like it is what it is.
yeah, it is what it is.
It is what it is. Is actually very zen.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Or you can
It's
keep
an
hollering about it
acceptance.
till the cows come home, but that ain't going to change nothing.
There you go. It's another way of saying is what it is.
Yeah, and
It's gonna be what it's gonna be.
but yeah, it's the one thing that really gives me hope is seeing, people really actually striving to do this meaning making thing, even if they're not necessarily aware of what John Vervaeke and his
People are still trying to put positive energy out there.
yeah.
Yeah, they're creating art of all kinds, some new stories. There's a lot of good work being done in film and media and in storytelling
Mm-hmm.
right now.
And there's three reactions to
I think that's the forefront of the real change.
yeah, and there's three reactions to this anxiety and stress we can do. The most optimistic one is make art and love and understanding. The next one is, well, just destroy it, burn it down so we can do something
choose
better.
A side, get deeply entrenched, only believe that.
Yeah. And then the
not
third
look for
way,
conciliation and understanding, because really there's very many perspectives out there, and postmodernism
Yeah.
shows us that. But postmodernism is getting us to, like meta-modernism is getting us to take everything into account that we figured out so far and say, okay, if there's a lot of different alternating theories for everything out there that are divergent, what are the ones that work best for us as a species together to be more symbiotic in a way that is not violently forcing people against their will to do things that are against what they believe, or I mean, how do we find a way to interrelate
well,
on
that's
a higher level
that's
than
where
we
the
have before,
first way.
because now we have such technologies that we have this capacity to destroy ourselves and this planet along with us.
Well, that's
and
where the first response is, or that I mentioned, was make art, spread love, be creative,
yes,
do those things.
there's that.
So that's the first way. The second way is to destroy, and the third is to freeze and do nothing. And
Well,
that's where the work really can
That's
be
where
done, is with people that are not the ones who want to burn the system down, even though those people could really benefit from finding meaning. But it's harder to get through to that right now. What we can get through is to people who are just like, well, what's the point?
Yeah. All of our old belief systems are being called to question now.
Yeah, so my whole thing is like the people who are making art and doing all that stuff is wonderful. and we can use art and all this love to get to the people who are just, like, okay, well, why should I do this? I'm just like, they're deciding not to act or do anything. And then once we get enough of the people who decide not to act to be acting and acting in love, the people and the ideas of acting in destruction some of them will convert over, others will burn themselves out within their
We have to
ideals,
change
and they'll
the
crash.
prevailing mode of being. Is what I hear you saying.
Yeah, and
I agree with this so much.
And figure out the most efficient places to put your energy.
Because we have to be more understanding.
Yeah.
We have to be willing to work with and figure all of this out together. That's the mode of being that I think we have to be in right now. But we're getting very entrenched into our different tribes.
Sure, yeah.
And hiding behind our different. I don't mean to say this in a mean way, but hiding behind. But I mean, we're very much becoming entrenched and walling ourselves off.
Yeah.
In our belief systems, and
And
whether it be Republican versus Democrat, or Christian versus being Hindu versus being Jewish versus being Islamic versus being this versus being that, everyone should have the freedom and to be who they are, as long as we're not committing violence against one another.
well, I guess the only way to truly do that, because you can't make
And we're trying to figure out the best systems of doing that.
yeah, because you can't make a law out of it.
But we have
and you can't
distrust
do
in
that.
all of the systems, including the American system now.
Yeah, but what we can do is start to do, and
Do
people
better.
will see it works, and people will go, "What are you doing that's working?"
Right.
Well,
Well,
this
what-
is
Yeah, what were the forefathers going for with the ideal of the American Constitution? What are people, free-loving people around the world, going for when they develop democratic systems of delegation, systems of co-governance, basically?
Well, it's the balancing of, say, it's the balancing of
self-governance, basically.
what we need to have in order to survive as a healthy society and grow, and then what we need to do to be. Because, like, me personally,
But we don't know what we are and why we are and all of these things. We've lost all these stories now, and
yeah.
that makes things so much more uncertain than just figuring out how we work together best. Is what are the new stories that we are going to be telling, and how do we resurface the old stories? Because there's ingenious myths that truly are perennial. They truly are wise and timeless ways that we can revisit and build upon. And they can help us guide in our understanding of how to tell a good myth, what sticks around for a long time and remains true thousands of years later. And we have great examples of this.
Well, yeah, because there's people who did it, and then we go, "Ooh, how'd you do that? What is that you're doing?" And instead of somebody just explain it to you, they're like, "Well, let me teach you."
So this is a going-in process. We were learning to take this on ourselves as individuals.
Well, and yeah, so first, ultimately everything starts as individuals, and any truly functioning governmental system should respect that the decision making, the sovereignty of the decision maker first starts with the individual, then the individual's family, then a conglomeration of individual families in a community,
and how well informed those individuals are is how
because like
good the information is they have to act upon. You want to be able to be wise. You need good information.
Yeah. Well, it almost seems like our systems, the way they're designed right now, or at least the powers that be want to push them towards, is they're trying to shift the idea of the sovereign decision maker being the individual into the sovereign decision maker being the topmost, the experts, the science, the decision makers, the betters,
the
but
government,
and
elites.
And government would be down here in the middle. Whereas, like, in my opinion, as an anarchist, I could see a small functioning, say, federalized republic type government working if you just treated them like employees and not like rulers.
They're supposed to manage things.
Yeah,
for
no,
you,
you're
but they're not
employee
supposed
managers. We pay your paycheck
to enforce unless.
and listen to us. And
you need a wise, informed populace with responsible, respected delegators.
A wise, informed individual.
If you want to go representatives, you can go there.
But a wise individual, because
But they have to be able to actually directly
well, you're
relate the intent of the people.
And the thing is the
that
people
they represent.
The populace is not wise. That's not how it works.
That's the problem.
The individuals
with the mob rule,
are
with democracy by itself.
The individuals
without the balance
can
of
be
protection
wise
for minorities that republicanism allows for.
Yeah, and it like.
So you merge those two things together. We have this democratic republic.
Yeah, and like.
And that's pretty good. That's the best we've done so far on this planet, and then other countries have replicated it. And in some ways, maybe you've done a little bit better with social services, but less populations and different demographics, and they're not the ones that are doing most of the innovation, spending most of the money on the innovation in medicine or anything else.
Frankly, it's when a...
So there's a lot of different arguments out there. But that market system that we even developed, a free market system for people, is crazy. That we once incredibly tribal and warring hominids, primates, as we are, have gotten this social, in fact, incredibly socially adept, as to become good at making music and painting pictures and telling stories and making jokes to make each other laugh and smile, and creating art to make each other feel good. All the ways that we exist now is such a long, far away from where we've come.
Well, we've always
always
done that, but now we can do it. We make people smile and we engage in that way, but we can do it cross-culturally, cross-country, technology has helped with that.
What is it that Christianity is trying to teach us? What is it that Buddhism was trying to teach us? What is it that all of these great wisdom schools of our past were trying to teach us? And we have to really take these things on, I think, because...
it wasn't that...
Having lost them, we find ourselves in disarray and imbalanced.
Yeah, it wasn't
without meaning.
It wasn't the awakening masses that they were trying to teach. It was the awakening individual. And the problem we're in right now, too, is we've given up our authority to make decisions for ourselves to something that has gotten way too big for its britches.
And everybody knows it's an oligarchy. Everybody knows that we're run by financial interests.
Well, I tell you what, if
taken over various
financial interests want to take my money and they'll pave the roads and they'll keep the sewer systems running and they'll do all that, fine. I don't care if they're all doing back dealings and whatnot. But I only want them to do this, and this. But it seems like everything else
you can't discourage the back dealings with infinite laws. We've tried that. You really do need to invest in creating
because it becomes more open,
ethical beings. And how do you have better, more
individual
ethical beings without compelling stories to compel the individual?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I ultimately do want to help many people and help the people and everything, but I can't do that by screaming on a soapbox at people. But what I can do is come to grasp with it as best as I can, lead by example myself, and hope that what I'm doing can change at least one other person.
How do we do this together?
Yeah,
how do we do this in concert?
And we already have, a concert is a good way to do it. Concert, seminars, come hang out. Yeah, we already got the rituals for it, and we've got beautiful technology that allow us to share these rituals instead of just having to be there. Now you can watch it from across the planet, and you can see what's going on and become a part of it and come to it individually yourself.
Yeah,
and in not in this way where it's like compelling everybody come here, but it is, and everybody's coming not because they're being scooped up with a net. It's because they're seeing the shiny, and they're walking into it on their own volition.
Well, if it's true and it's authentic and there's a lot of good creative energy of that sort being put into it, then it's going to be attractive.
Sure.
And that's what we want to do more of right now. I think we need a creative explosion, in fact a creative charge of all artists throughout the world. Yeah, as much energy as we can put into it, and maybe into helping brighten and helping not awaken ourselves, the world, because we can only awaken ourselves, but encourage the arts of awakening and of mindfulness, and encourage the arts of conciliation, and willingness to look from one another's points of view and to actually learn how to better inhabit a more truly unconditionally loving, as Christ expressed, mode of being
Well, I guess
in this world, like with our own inner practice, and then learning to do that with one another and reform our sense and our ways of worship, and recognizing these are there are some vastly recognized deep truths that chime for every human being, that when we act in accord with, we find ourselves in higher states of consciousness, higher modes of being and relation, and we feel more joyful and at peace, and we're acting in an optimized fashion as well, so that we're more effective in our interrelation with our environment and the world. So better for survival, for
so.
the individual,
How do we make
the
that
wider species.
how do we make this marketable? And I don't mean in the way of like monetary marketable, but to create a marketplace
Captivating enough to grab enough people.
So that's the
to
trick,
help shift humanity, because
this
we've lost trust in all of the prevailing institutions. Again, when we say this, it doesn't. It's just glossing over something very deep that Vervaeke gets into in episode 1 and 2 of this series, which we should start going through a little bit of the notes and talking through, and as we explore this. Yeah.
But
Yeah, I lost my train there because I looked down at the paper there.
but I want to continue
Yeah,
on just real quick with the making it marketable.
Okay.
Because
you saw the thread there, yes.
I have a really big gripe with what I'll refer to as, and I don't mean this as an insulting way, but high-minded stuff. What I see, my biggest gripe is it doesn't get out there, and it doesn't get out there because it doesn't have that super salient kind of like bullshit, but without the bullshit. It doesn't have that, hey, it grasps you thing, but you know what does? How to get ripped and jacked in just 60 days. So how do we take this and make it as super salient as the how do you get jacked in 60 days, but instead of being a bunch of bullshit, it's actually instilling great amounts of wisdom. Because we
have to turn our energy up, and then we have to find a way to do that authentically, because I don't want to do it the way that it's being done.
Well, no, and you don't have to, like, in order to make, like, you can make the print darker, and that makes it more salient. That's one way of, say, getting print to be more readily absorbed, and that's where I think
that is our job
some
as
of the
artists
best work,
to figure out what are the most compelling ways.
Well, that's the point of the artist,
because it doesn't. They don't all have to be wide reaching. Some of them can be super niche.
Yeah,
but that's going to inspire a certain kind of individual or a subset of individuals that are probably going to do amazing artistic work out there and turn into the next Bjork.
You hit the nail on the head. That's what the artist does.
Yes,
it makes these wisdom lessons and these things super soluble.
Yeah.
Or super salient and soluble to vast amounts of people in a personal, individual way.
I'm turning.
And one thing, if you've noticed, art, mainstream movies, mainstream things are kind of just bad. So, there's a market opening up for good music, good film.
If it's good, it's amazing how universal it is.
And if it has good wisdom in it, people like it.
The Walking Dead.
Yeah, hey, that's about zombies and stuff, but actually it's more about zombies.
It was so popular, I didn't watch it at first because it was so popular. It's one of those things, right? But then I watched it and I was like, oh, now I see why this is popular, and it's really clever. It's really wise what they're doing here.
Yeah, it's about
how it's about how we are figuring out different people are interacting and how do they get along in this situation of crisis and social breakdown. And we are seeing a time right now where we are in the midst of perhaps the danger of civilizational collapse. We're certainly in a level of social strife that is new, and the environment is so different than it's ever been for us as a species. Not only do we have all of this high-def, high-speed technology and all of the world's at our fingertips, but we also have these compounding myriad crises facing us as a species, whether it be life dying off in the ocean, massive dead zones, whether it be the fact that we've polluted or destroyed most of the soil and the healthy earth. from which to farm.
Or,
Or we're using pesticides,
human
but we don't know how to grow enough food without them. We're extremely wasteful.
human
We don't have very optimized systems.
or human depopulation in
We can't agree on
westernized
what's real
countries,
anymore. Yeah.
which is going to be a big thing. Like
Our belief in God is wavering, but then we're also at the same time becoming increasingly interested in mindfulness and Eastern mysticism, and then we're reawakening to Christianity and the old myths again. So we're trying to reincorporate things and build something perhaps new, or perhaps just a more integrated understanding of ourselves, culture as a planetary culture now, that as we're starting to develop together on a planetary level
I
due to
think
the internet.
that's
Because what's happening.
that's really the biggest change, is the fact that we are on a global scale.
That's what's happening now, though, isn't it?
Interactiveness,
Yeah.
and it's not global scale where it takes months and months and months and months. It's a truly global scale.
Yeah.
Like the example of like direct communication, but also I can observe things now that would never be observable in human history prior to now, and by that I mean something happening on the other side of the planet now, like now, not.
Oh, sure.
Not waiting
Epstein
for it
didn't
to-
kill himself. Tags
Yeah.
spread across the world like
That. Oh yeah.
Dude,
Oh yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
knew, and everybody agreed at once. It was hilarious.
And then the memes,
probably hundreds of millions.
and
of
then the
people.
memes that are continuing. What do they call it? Meme magic. Not to
Do you
put
think
too much
I
on
bet
memes,
a billion people saw that within 48 hours, close to it. Hundreds of millions. Of
and
people
actually probably more because people showing
were
it to
aware
their
of it.
friends on
Yes,
the phone.
became aware
not just
of it.
the yeah.
Within the week, at least, maybe we reached a billion.
It's crazy. Well, and also we're at the point in time now too where individually we can put things out on the internet that will never be forgotten. So every single bad take, particularly with young folk, imagine being a teenager and everything you're doing is permanent, because teenagers now, where they hang out is on the computers with each other, instead of like, oh well, only 5 of my friends saw me beef or eat it, but
Yeah,
now
but now
everybody's seen you beef and eat it, and it's forever.
Yeah, but now like psychologists are going on Lex Friedman and Joe Rogan and all these popular podcasts and shows, and people are learning about themselves psychologically. John Vervaeke, Jordan Peterson's, and all these people.
Well, yeah, the access to high level education is also more free now too.
High level conversations, complex subjects.
A lot of professors are just putting their lectures out on the interwebs, and instead of going somewhere and auditing
controversial
the class,
issues that people need to work out are being worked out.
Yep,
And people that disagree but are willing to try and hash it out together.
Well, and I think that's where the pushback from the establishment as it is, whether it's in media, politics, or anything else, the established old way, the reason why they're fighting back is because this new way doesn't really have any room for the anointed ones on top with all the knowledge that you should look up to. The reason why we look up to people now is because we see them and we see the true character of them, not because they're held up.
Demystified the ultra wealthy. We're only interested in the fact that the things that maintain interest for us seem to be people that are successful for a reason. And what is that reason? That's the thing that's interesting to us. How is Elon Musk capable of doing what he does? Multiple companies to make him the richest billionaire on the planet. Even after buying Twitter, he's still the number one somehow billionaire. But look at the work that he's done. Look at the companies that he's started up or that he's built up.
I have a theory on his method, and I think it actually could really apply to reshaping your salience landscape. And that what he does with his rockets is he prototypes and then he blows it up, and he figures out what blew up and he fixes that. And then he blows it up again, and he figures out, and he does this with companies too, like the Boring Company. First it started out with I'm just digging a hole.
Right.
And then I'm going to, prototype and test all this stuff out that's not going to work. And then I'm going to test out pressed bricks that aren't necessarily going to work, but he's learning from the failures. and
Makes sense.
then
Yeah.
applying what
So we're interested
know,
in people that are good at optimizing,
and good at failing and learning
even if we
from
don't
it.
like them.
Yeah,
We're interested if they're good at
yeah.
optimizing,
I'm not a
because
Musk
we're trying to
fanboy.
learn
I
how to
tell you that,
optimize
but
better in our environments as
sure,
well. So
yeah,
that's why
yeah.
people that are good at achieving, whether it's a basketball player
Mm-hmm.
or it's a musician or
Sure, yeah.
that's doing something that has great virtuosity to it, or they're achieving things of high level skill or high level accomplishment, that's what we're interested in. We're not interested in how much money you have or how big your muscles are. We're
Well,
interested
yeah,
in your willpower. We're
yeah,
interested in your will in the first
yeah.
place. Like what inspires you? What are you driven by? What goodness are you trying to bring into the world? Is there some kind of heroic instinct in you? Because that automatically lights us up. Why does that light us up?
Yeah. Well,
How
that's
how and why do we make meaning? Is very much the crux of this entire series that we've been going through
sorry.
here together. Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, John Vervaeke. Like, what is meaning? Why is there this hunger for wisdom? What are the light and dark factors that give us meaning, which is predictive of a well-being and an antidote to nihilism in our world? Because we have been losing faith in the prevailing institutions. This is episode 1 of Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. So
what is the
Vervaeke
time?
starts to break down.
What
We're at,
as far as like what's the time on the clock?
we're about 40 minutes in here, so
I do have to piddle, so could we take a quick piddle and then go through the notes now that we've had?
yeah, let's do that. So we'll take a quick break here,
Sorry,
guys. And
I've finally rehydrated after like 3 days of being dehydrated, and now my
Is that
body's
what
like,
you mean
all
by
right.
piddle?
Oh yeah. No, like I go through times where
Everybody, go ahead and take yourself a break and get yourself a piddle. Maybe pop some corn. Grab yourself a snack or a drink so that you are hydrated. And yes, you are going to have to piddle again later on, but it's
Yeah.
worthwhile because keeping your body hydrated.
because don't go dehydrated, because then you get dehydrated, and then when you rehydrate, your body's like, oh, I got all that crap I need to get out, so we're gonna pee like crazy, and it's just like great.
Yeah, yeah. But it's also good for your body to be
Yeah,
hydrated.
yeah.
Humans,
Yeah,
fellows.
we're mostly water.
We were aquatic apes, as we were talking
I
about
believe that. I believe
previously
that.
to
Yeah.
this
Yeah,
this recording,
aquatic
this
ape
live stream.
theory.
Yeah.
If you don't know
aquatic
it,
ape
look
theory.
it up. It's
Look
very
it up.
compelling.
There's a TED talk on it,
Yeah.
actually. There's this cute old woman that breaks down aquatic ape theory in the most compelling way.
And actually,
You'll find yourself a believer.
and if you look into that, it actually gives a lot of meaning to why we're shaped the way
Yeah,
we are.
The Discovery
habits are-
or History Channel mermaid documentary that came after, probably a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
But the aquatic ape lady on the TED talk is legit.
Yeah, like as in like we went from trees into swamps and then crawled up out of swamps, not like we were like
We
in
have
the ocean
subcutaneous
and
fat
yeah.
that is around our muscles instead of
Yeah.
marbled through our muscles, like only diving mammals have.
Yeah.
We can hold our breath underwater like only
got
diving
flipper-
mammals, and we got
flipper
flipper-like
feet.
feet, unlike the gorillas and other apes.
And the only time, like
We have most of our fur gone.
yeah,
Yeah.
which fur is not useful in the water.
No,
It-
you don't need too much fur
yeah.
in the water. Way of keeping yourself warm still, so we do have it
Mhm.
fat wrapped around our muscle, and then we have a little bit left. But
And also the other thing is
we lost most of it.
with very little training, you can teach a baby. So babies know how to hold their breath if you submerge them. But then with very little training, you can teach them to wiggle themselves and flip themselves onto their back, and they can float like otters.
Oh,
There's a program they do to teach new
Cute.
parents how to teach their infants how to do that in case they like fall into the pool
Yeah,
or something
Oh,
like that
that's
happens, and they can
awesome.
orient themselves and then
Yeah.
flip themselves upright.
Yeah,
So
you can teach them that
aquatic
when they're
ape theory, there's something to it.
when
Not
they're
the
very-
mermaids, but like
very young. Yeah, infants, newborns.
oh, and you know something we can do? Our nose goes down and we can cover it up with our top lip. That's what I
Oh
do.
yeah, yeah.
Keep
and
water
you
from
can
going back
pinch
down
and
in
you
it.
can
Yeah,
close
yeah,
here and
yeah,
here. You got webs.
Yeah. Our fingers pucker when they get wet, so we can not just have better grip, but feel things better in the water.
Yeah,
Fun.
the holding the breath is the biggest one.
Yeah.
Though.
Which gave us the ability
Only diving
to
and
sing
swimming
and
animals
to talk.
are able to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, like if you look,
So we were very aquatic for a time.
yep, hanging out in the swamp. That
Aquatic
makes sense.
apes.
That makes sense.
All right, guys, we're gonna be right back. Hang tight. Give us like 5 or 10 minutes, and grab yourself something, whatever you need, and we will see you shortly. What's up, everybody? We're back.
We're back. We didn't hit the red button.
No,
should
we
not
almost
hit.
hit the
Oh,
magic
man.
red button there that has the stream rolling.
All right.
Camera one.
So we're going to go through some notes that a wonderful individual made that are clear and concise, and we're going to try to get through all 10 episodes.
Yeah, I have my notes here too. But we're just going to mostly try and use our memory as well as we can.
Yep.
I'm going to probably have to use my notes a lot. But we're going to try and run through these episodes and spend 5 to 10 minutes per episode. And not doing a total breakdown of every episode, but a cursory run through to catch ourselves up to where we are now, to help us orient and make sure that we're keeping track of all the terminology and everything that Vervaeke is presenting.
We're doing the gestalt of it all, the structural functional organization.
Yes,
and,
yes.
So what's this guy's name?
Mark Mulvey.
Thank you, Mark.
M-A-R-K. Mulvey, M-U-L-V-E-Y.
Check him out. He's got
Check
good
him
notes.
out on his Medium, markmulvey.medium.com. You can find his summaries and notes of the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis lectures, and I was looking over them recently here, and they're great. He did a really good job of highlighting various quotes from Vervaeke and summarizing everything quite coherently. So we're going to use that to help guide ourselves here. I got my notes as well, my scribbles too. And we're going to jog our old memory boxes and see
I've got my
what
scribbles
falls
too,
out.
but you can't see them. They're just in here.
No, we're going to do our best. We're already 50 minutes in here, guys. So thank you so much for whoever's tuning into this episode of Actuali. It's a part 1 and a part 2 kind of thing on this episode, where we gave you just a gestalt of where we're feeling, where we're at, and our response to this.
And, the meaning crisis as we see it.
Crisis as we see it, yeah. And now we're going to get into a quick summary of each one of these episodes that we've covered thus far, and I guess our personal reactions to it, and the stories and the things, the ways that we're relating to it, and how it's enriching our own lives. And I see that DJ is yawning and tired over here.
Oh,
so
I'm old. Once it gets to like 9, 10 o'clock, I turn into a pumpkin. But hey,
we're gonna have to get this guy excited here.
Oh, I'm excited. I could be excited and yawn at the same time. Come on now. I yawn on roller coasters.
Well, we're going to jog through this at a brisk pace, guys. Yes. And we're going to, in that way, hopefully, find ourselves with a pretty coherent understanding of where we are so far in this series. So beginning with part 1, we encountered the very question proposed by Vervaeke, what is meaning? And here's a quote from Vervaeke that Mark shares with us. Many people are talking about the meaning crisis, but what I want to argue is that these problems are deeper than just social media problems, political problems, even economic problems. They're deeply historical, cultural, cognitive problems. And this is coming from a cognitive science professor who is also deeply versed and a longtime practitioner and teacher of Buddhism and Tai Chi, and also runs courses on the psychology of Buddhism and works in AI on the cutting edge of cognitive science and understanding of consciousness. So we start off with the question, why this hunger for wisdom? Vervaeke noticed that there's this growing confluence between interest in Buddhism and people who are interested in cognitive science and mindfulness in general. The mindfulness books in the stores and
it's gone past like the self-help thing to actual like real substantial good stuff, not just
the mindfulness section is growing and growing and growing, and there's actually really good stuff to be found there now. It's not just superficial.
The wishy-washy has been wished and washed out, or is being wished and washed out. We're all craving more.
We're craving what's sticky, what actually works. So we're looking for meaning. Meaning is predictive of well-being. It's an antidote to nihilism. So we have this growing interest in the topic of wisdom. Why this interest in wisdom? Vervaeke brings up how he bought his son a book called How to Be a Stoic. And that's Greek philosophy. Why is his son interested in this right now? Why are these things becoming very popular right now? At the same time, and also there's a growing interest not just in wisdom but in psychedelics, in mystical experiences such as enlightenment and awakening, self-realization, self-transcendence, and happiness, meaning itself. And the argument here is that there's no coincidence that there's a growing interest in all of these things. There's also a growth on the other side of this of nihilism and cynicism, and a lack of trust and participation in clubs and religions and etc. and so forth. This is showing up in our entertainment. Why are superheroes so prevalent right now? Why are apocalypse stories and zombies so popular? And you start to see that there's the subcurrent of wisdom
Hmm.
that humanity is trying to tap back into. And it's trying to tell stories in ways that are going to be relevant to us now because we're yearning for meaning. We're trying to reform ourselves to our environment because we have destroyed all of the old our beliefs and all of the old prevailing institutions.
Destroyed or neglected, but yeah,
or neglected,
yeah.
or yeah. Or you
Um,
see what Nietzsche was so concerned about happening,
yeah, we killed
that
God,
we
and that's
killed
not a
God
good thing,
and
you know.
we'll never be done finished cleaning up the blood, so to speak.
Yeah, and like the killing of the God isn't just like, oh yeah, it's the highest murder, so it's bad. No, it's the destroying of the highest standard.
The highest
know.
standard and a sense of transcendence,
Yes.
something beyond us. Like
Yeah.
even if we are agnostic, we can be aware of the fact that there's this limitlessness to the universe. There's
Hmm.
this great mystery and it's awe-inspiring how beautiful and how vast it is. So that sense of transcendence is very important for us as humans to retain because it's our sense of it's our arena of possibility,
Yeah.
our awareness of what possibilities lay before us and the arenas that we are operating in according to how our consciousness works, as Vervaeke teaches us. All of this is very important to us as human beings. When we lose a sense of the transcendence, we become imbalanced. We don't know how to orient.
Hmm.
We need something greater to reach for,
Yeah,
to help guide our evolution in a way that is going to continue to be subservient to higher ideals such as symbiosis and love, working together, working in conciliation, thriving together as best as we can.
and we have a really deep drive to do
Yes, we
this
have a
too.
need
That's
for
that's
this.
that's
Yes.
it's almost akin to the deep drive of like eating or procreation. It's that deep, and when we can't do it, we get really stressed out. And
Yeah.
here we are,
Yeah.
very stressed out from it
Yeah.
because we're not fulfilling something so deep to our being. And we don't really have the sticky words for it, or well, when I say we, I mean like generally we don't have the words for it. What we're doing here and what Vervaeke's been doing and what so many other people are doing is helping get us back, or
Yeah.
get us back
Recollect
to
ourselves. in
yeah
a sense, right?
and remembering
rebalance, and become
ourselves.
belonging.
Yeah.
Feel a sense of belonging to this world again.
Yeah.
To remember is to become a member again, as he's described to us when you look at the etymology of that word. So wisdom is about realizing, in both senses of the word, becoming aware and making real the meaning of life and it's becoming aware and making real the meaning of life in a profound way. How do we cultivate this wisdom? What does wisdom mean? And we now get into the subject or the idea that there's deep connections between meaning, wisdom, self-transcendence, and altered states of consciousness. And that's actually what we're getting into now in the series. We're coming into higher states of consciousness.
Yeah, so this first
and why
episode
it is so meaningful and helpful for the human species.
Yeah, this first episode is like a statement of intent of what we're going to be like.
Well said. Yes.
Is what we're going to be going into as we progress through this series.
Yes.
Yes. Because what I'm noticing is like going back through this and then watching back on episode 1, it's not necessarily a teaching or explaining thing. It's here's what I'm going to attempt to teach and to explain
this
and
is
expand
the argument
upon.
that I'm making.
Yes.
This is
like setting us up for this.
Yes. He actually even says like maybe we can propose by the end of this series a cognitive scientific account of what enlightenment is.
Yes.
What is happening in the brain? What are the neurological, physical factors that are happening? What are the psychological factors? What is actually happening in the person's mind in the sense of the transcendence that they're experiencing? How does this help them? How do they feel months and years later after these experiences? All of these different
Mm-hmm.
accounts that we can grab to try and understand why this fascination with higher states of
Yes.
consciousness, that all of the ancient wisdom schools, all the ancient religions and spiritual traditions teach and try and guide us towards,
And using the
whether by
science.
fasting, by praying, by worshipfulness, by
Mm-hmm.
lovingness, by usage of various plant medicines and ritualistic fashions, and so on and so forth.
And the attempt being done within a scientific method
Mm.
way where it's replicatable, where we can observe it and then do it again.
Yes, as a cognitive scientist, he's
Yeah.
interested in being able to help bridge science and
Yeah.
mysticism, because it's been
Yeah.
broken
Yeah.
since the time of Plato and Pythagoras,
Mm-hmm.
really. So we actually went back with Vervaeke through Socrates and Plato, and we'll get into that here shortly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what's the connection? Because there's deep and profound connections between this meaning making that is so central and this endemic capacity for self-deception and self-destruction. So we got into the idea of ignorance and how when we lack the wisdom, the very same machinery that makes you adaptively intelligent is the same machinery that makes you susceptible to foolishness.
Mm-hmm.
So we learned about bullshit, the technical meaning of bullshit. When people use the word meaning, they're using the word as a metaphor, i.e., there's something in their life that is analogous to how a sentence has meaning. Pieces fit together in some way that connect you to the world. Why are the most meaningful experiences people have the ones that are the most ineffable to them, that they can't put into words?
Mm-hmm.
We need to understand all of this to understand why are we making meaning the way we make. This is what's going to help us write the new stories and the new reasons for being that we need to be able to go on together as a species. So this is a very exciting time. What we're delving into here is historic, and it's hard to encapsulate the depth of that statement because it just can't. It's hard to put it in a way that allows us to really feel the sense of the times we're in. One really has to be willing to take a step back and look at this world with an unbiased perspective and just kind of see, okay, this is where the species is at. This is all that's happening. You can see all these ideas are competing. People are becoming increasingly upset, depressed, discordant, and also cruel to one another. Their belief in all of their prevailing systems that guided them morally and helped them get along together, at least okay in some cases, are being dissipated and destroyed, forgotten, or neglected. And how do these people put this thing back together? If you look at this and then you zoom back in, okay, now we're in it, and we find these old stories that teach us how to be more loving and peaceable together. Very, very compelling again. And now we're having to stitch them back together.
Yeah.
So that's very much what this series has given us the opportunity. It's inviting us into understanding how we can do that on a very deep cognitive science, psychological level, as well as just a life living level. He's going to help us understand why the practice of meditation is useful and how to utilize it, why the practice of contemplation is useful and how to utilize it, how we can enter deeper and deeper states of flow, and how to utilize them to maximize our potential and actualize higher modes of being in this life for the benefit of one and all together, so we can be the great servants that and stewards that we know that we have this great potential to be. So that would be a good way to sum up episode 1. All of this, including how therapy alters, transforms your interpretation of self and realness. The upper Paleolithic transition, human beings begin to undertake a variety of new activities: sculpting, painting, music, throwing. And this is how we begin to develop language over time.
And with
And
throwing, it
to
gives us
exact one part of the brain to be able to do another thing.
yeah, and with like say like throwing that learning that gives us a subject and object understanding. Like so, there's the
There you go. Yes.
yeah, so the idea, like I guess to sum it up easily, is there's me and then there's you, and I can see from your point of view. And then expanding upon that, now you're interacting with more people, and we're starting to trade.
Mm-hmm.
We're no longer hunter gatherers constantly moving around. We're starting to plant ourselves and become settled, and we're starting to trade.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
is this in the first episode? But I think we start developing rituals for strangers. How do you deal with strangers? Shaking of the
I
hand.
believe so. We developed
Yeah,
calendars, tracking time,
yeah.
more sophisticated hunting techniques, spear throwing. We learned about projecting,
Mm-hmm.
what a project is, to
Yeah,
have an aim and to throw something
yeah,
towards it. An object is the thing you're
yeah,
throwing against, and the subject is the thing that you're trying to understand that you're trying to throw it at.
yeah.
And so we started to develop music, sculpture, paintings, and okay, I wanted to backtrack real fast on my notes because I noticed here how to cultivate mindfulness or how to cultivate wisdom. We developed mindfulness practices. This is a part of what we're getting into now in the series as we delved into the
Mm-hmm.
East for a bit. We've been going to West and East in our journey with Vervaeke. Why do humans and other animals seek to alter consciousness is part of what the series is going to help us answer and understand. Why? Because it facilitates transformative experiences that allow us to upgrade ourselves to meet our environments better. So, why this interest in enlightenment that happens in the previous axial revolution and the mindfulness revolution that is occurring
Mm-hmm.
now? And that gets us to the understanding of okay, we covered foolishness, in ignorance, our capacity to fool ourselves and BS ourselves. Our our goal our goals can be undermined by our capacity to bullshit ourselves. The sense of meaninglessness um, that we have now in the world and why it's happening is, as we've discussed, is because we've lost touch with all of these meaning-making stories and myths and institutions because
Mm-hmm.
they've been degrading over time, and now we have to rebuild something that can last for future generations. And this is the great task for us as humans alive today. That's what is so exciting and compelling and so monumentous about that this time that we're in, and what I'm so grateful for Vervaeke doing here, because he's broken this down like in a way that I could have never even understood to wish for.
Yeah.
So this is about as comprehensive an understanding of why we've gotten where we are and how we can awaken from it that we can possibly get as human beings. And so thank you very much, John Vervaeke, for providing us this to help us orient ourselves in these crazy, friggin' unstable times, and so uncertain and so upsetting as
Mm-hmm.
they can be. So yeah, we got into calendars, the tracking of time, more sophisticated hunting techniques. We developed deeper ways of making meaning in art, and we developed trade networks. We increased resources. We started to think in terms of language and in terms of mathematics
Well, so
because of our trading.
the trade networks, what that did is it expanded our cognitive network
Yes,
from not just an individual, but now we're sourcing multiple
this is
individuals.
where we get distributive
And
cognition from.
yeah,
Yes.
and the advent of language as far as written wise expanded that even further. So now you can connect to the past. You connect your present brain to the past and the future, and with other brains within the distributed cognitive network.
Yes. There you go.
Um,
Yeah, and how shocking it is that we hang out with strangers, and that we're able to actually
yeah,
put our heads together to be able to distribute our cognition in wider and wider networks to magnify our capacity to solve problems on greater and greater levels, like building spaceships, for
yeah,
instance.
and this is where we're introduced to the idea of a psychotechnologies.
Yep.
So like rituals, like trading rituals, like the shaking of the hand, or
Yes.
cleansing yourself before you go into the
Yes.
marketplace,
That
or
brings up mindsight, the shaking of
yeah,
the hand, picking up on each other,
mm-hmm,
and thus one's sense of self, and the
yeah,
trading rituals and the other rituals
yeah,
of cleaning oneself
and
before
then
you
you need
trade.
the rituals of
Mm-hmm.
proving yourself, like proving your
Loyalty.
loyalties as well, because
Yes.
now dealing with lots of strangers. So we have rituals to build, so
Developed
psychotechnologies
initiation
in
rituals.
order to
Yeah.
work with strangers, but now we need ones to
We need
work
new
with our
initiation rituals.
sure, yeah.
Don't we?
Well, we got rid of a lot of them,
Yeah.
like, because, well, usually, like, so initiation rituals, um are something that you're not the, like, say you're not the center of attention, but the attention is centered upon you.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a tendency, at least back in this time, but usually throughout time, to be like different sexes have different initiation rituals. Like, you know, the young men would have like the warrior ritual, and then the young women would have their other rituals. And so like, and we've had those up to a point, and now with the way we're playing with things, it's almost undesirable to have this. But it's like, well, you know, men need the ritual of being like, hey, yeah, you're part of the club, let me punch you on the shoulder. Right. And I'm not saying all men need exactly that, but like we still need that initiation into a brotherhood or into a sisterhood. Mm-hmm. And then you have that comes together, an initiation into the community that is a merger of these two things. And so how do we get that back, but without, you know, it being misandrist or misogynist or any of the ists?
No, yeah, we're looking for a true egalitarian world now, but we still want to maximize the gifts that masculinity and femininity bring to the world. That we fit together like puzzle pieces in this way.
Because we're also like with these,
we all have these aspects within us,
and with these rituals, we're also showing our, like, say, like between the sexes, we're showing our loyalty to each other. You know, whether it's like marriage rituals or, you know, like bonding rituals and things. So these are psychotechnologies we use in order to help.
Yeah. Psychological techniques of interrelating with the world, basically.
Yeah.
And we have language, we have these initiation rituals and other life rituals that we developed.
These are all software upgrades opposed to hardware upgrades, because the brain hasn't changed in 200,000 years or so.
But we've developed these incredible psychotechnologies that help us really and accelerates our adaptation after that. Yeah.
I think that might be delving a little into the second episode, but they kind of blur together.
Yeah, so...
And on to the second.
So the initiation rituals, being vulnerable, the willingness to be vulnerable. One must improve their capacity for seeing and understanding from others' perspectives.
Yeah.
We find that to be very useful. Well, and that's what the initiation ritual does.
And also the handshake ritual, too. Your vulnerability of
people can throw doubt at the marriage, even during the wedding.
Yeah.
You know, and then you're not supposed to get married if somebody says, no, these two shouldn't get married for this reason. Yeah. So we got all kinds of cognitive enhancements to our thinking and use of our consciousness from the trading and the initiation rituals. And then we exapted our brain, and exaptation is the brain's capacity for using a part of itself made for one thing to do something else.
Yeah, and the example was like
the tongue.
Yeah, the tongue in the mouth
to identify poison and move food around. But we've learned to use it to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes go people. You know?
Right.
To mock, we can mock with the tongue too.
Yeah. You kiss with the tongue.
Yeah. Well, only if you're doing it right.
Indeed, as the French have taught us.
Yeah, if it's all about
French kissing, that's so funny. What a interesting. See all these cultural terms.
Here I've got some. Just it's a funny little side note, but what do fries and kissing have in common? Like if you're to like play a game of how close things are to each other. Well, French. You just put French. Well, there are French fries and there's French kissing. There's a commonality that wouldn't necessarily come to mind, but it's like now it's like, oh yeah, obviously, but why? But you know, it's kind of how your brain works. It tries to figure out what are the, you know, what are the connections. Yeah, you know. Yeah. Sorry, that's how my brain works. That's where it goes.
Well, remember when they were telling everybody that we should, because France didn't want to be involved in the Iraq War.
Oh, yeah, freedom fries.
Fries and all of that.
Yeah,
and all the media was behind it.
And nobody...
The media's always on the same page in times of war, left or right, doesn't matter.
Well, you know.
Freedom fries. And yeah, so I remember friends of mine and I, at a place that we were working, were calling everything that we could find like freedom instead of French. So freedom's mustard, and we were talking about sailing down the Freedom Riviera.
Freedom bread.
Freedom bread. It got stupid.
Oh,
it was a fun game.
You say a bad word, pardon my freedom, instead of pardon my French.
Nice. Oh, that's good. See? You would have been perfect for this. Yeah. But so We can't make fun of that one anymore because it's no longer culturally relevant. It wouldn't be a good meme right now. But back then, if memes were a thing, I think maybe they're beginning to be a
I think that
thing.
was like the beginning of the meme age, but it wasn't really like memes as we know
Yeah.
them. Well, memes have been
There
around
was memes.
forever,
Memes have been
you
around
know.
since the
Yeah.
beginning. As soon as the photographs could be made,
Well, even before
and before
photographs,
photographs, there were
scratching stuff into
ideas.
the wall, like
Well, there you go.
graffiti
That
art,
I mean, as
you
far
know.
as that kind of meme, yeah, technologically, memes have been around for I guess 20ish,
Yeah.
15 to 20
Yeah.
years. I don't know how. When did we start having images on the internet? I can't remember, but it was in the
Oh god.
90s.
Well, actually, even I think the song Yankee Doodle is a meme. So,
It's all text, and then you could start to see actual pictures and
yeah,
articles, and
yeah, but
that slowly, and then eventually video came along, but you'd have to wait a long time for it to buffer and load.
yeah, for one image, and then it would just build it piece by
Yeah.
piece by piece by piece by piece by piece.
Okay, so let's jump back into it. So we
Okay.
developed all these cognitive enhancements as a species, and then we started to develop shamanic rituals.
Mm,
We cultivated practices for controlling our mental states and increasing the development of insight.
and that's episode 2, right?
That's episode one
Yes.
still, I believe. Because
Yeah,
he's just giving us
yeah,
a
he
quick
just,
synopsis
yeah.
of what he's going to go over, and so we're
So,
going to go over this more in more depth. But yeah, he gives us shaman archetypes like Yoda and Gandalf, the wise
mm,
man. Everybody recognizes
every
these in
wizard, every
cartoons.
wizard you
You can
see
use
is a
them in every
shaman.
culture.
Yeah.
So these are good archetypes, symbols, and ways of being that humans can inhabit that are recognizable, that we
Yeah,
can learn from.
and really, like, I like the definition of shaman that isn't just the guy with the drugs, but like the shaman is the wise man, the one who has wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
opposed to like the modern conception of shaman. Oh, drugs and all this stuff. It's like, well, the drugs are to help break your framing, so then you can, see patterns that you may not have been able to see before.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah, anything
various
that breaks your framing
Yeah.
and is helping you connect things in new ways is going to help you add more to your overall salience
Mhm.
landscape if you use it wisely. And so, yeah, we get into the idea of the mind in the cave.
Mm.
We get into the idea of the software change that we've just been
Mhm.
discussing, the development of psychotechnologies, and the beginning of us becoming cyborgs. All the way back then,
Mhm.
in our early times as humans, primordial history, everything that is a tool becomes an extension of us. And then this way we are cybernetic beings.
Mhm.
We are able to take things and make them part of us.
Yep.
And we know how to conform and interact with all kinds of things as tools. Everything is a tool to the human being. So the ability to use a tool can be exapted, and we can do that cognitively with mental techniques to enhance our thinking, our consciousness even further with things such as literacy. So we developed the literacy as we discussed, and then he talks about the placebo effect a little bit, and I think that covers. Yeah, that covers
Yeah.
episode one.
And so on the placebo effect, just real quick. So what I gathered, what he's meaning by this is, even though, say, the shaman isn't actually becoming
Yes.
the deer,
It
you
helps
still have
that and
the
the way that he's embodying it
Yeah.
helps you understand how a deer moves and
Yeah.
acts in different circumstances.
Or like, like say like, healers that, like the healers that would like pretend to like pull things out of people even though they're hiding the bugs in their hands, but they knew the
somehow our
placebo
body
effect.
has the capacity to
Yeah.
heal itself.
So both healing
quite
and
effectively.
understanding can be.
So yeah,
but-
most medicine is placebo effect. It's like
Yes.
40 to 50% of the effects
Yes.
of most medicines are actually our own placebo
and that's
effect
how
working.
powerful our minds and our perceptions
Our mind
are.
is over our actual body, over our biology. Yeah. So yeah, we've used psychotechnologies to enhance our insight into other people and situations, and now we get into episode 2. And what was episode 2 called? Let me get back to Mark Mulvey's here. Because episode 1 was the introduction. Episode 2 was flow, metaphor, and the axial age, or the axial revolution. So we get into the idea of at one-ment, or deep attunement with one's environment, effortlessness, a sense of timelessness, the sense of self disappearing in these states, these deep states of higher consciousness that the human can experience. Metaphorical cognition is at the heart of both science and art.
The very words that we use are metaphors.
That's a quote from Vervaeke.
Yeah.
Everything that we do is a metaphor. It's amazing.
You know, because when I say apple, that's not an apple. It's a metaphor
representation
for the
an
apple.
actual thing. Yeah. So we talk about the flow experience in this episode, which is like being in the zone. If you think about it in sports or even in jazz music or any other number of things that people can specialize in.
The zone of
Lots
optimal
terms.
cognition.
The zone is one of the terms that we use for this experience that humans can have that come about when the situation is just slightly beyond your skill level.
But not so much so that you become
anxious. That you're anxious, but it's enough to challenge you. So you
you're
have
not
to
bored.
So you have to like turn on all your cognition and physiology at once in this really high state of attunement, and this sense of timelessness overcomes you, and you can just—it's almost like watching yourself.
And it almost seems to flow out of you.
Everything just seems to flow and just happen naturally.
Yeah.
And so this
Hence
is
the word
when
to flow.
your training meets the moment in a state of selflessness almost.
Mm-hmm.
And you just perfectly attune with, accord with, and dance with the moment. If skills exceed the demands, you can fall into boredom. So if you're really skilled, but the demands are not too hard, it's going to get boring. But if your demands exceed the skills too greatly, you can fall into anxiety. I am not ready for this.
Yeah. Well, it's like playing.
So this is how to get yourself into the state of flow, is to find something that's just at the edge of your comfort zone, that's just going to be a little bit of a challenge, that's going to push you to kind of try and reach beyond, and use every bit of everything that you've gained thus far and give you a good new challenge. That's how you induce the flow state.
Mm-hmm. And it's important to have the flow state because without a doubt, people who have experienced the flow state really find it to be truly meaningful, or helps their lives have meaning and find meaning
deeply
within
meaningful. And it's universal, culturally, socioeconomically, by gender, language, environments, whatever. Everyone describes the flow state the same way. When you're in a flow state, you feel like you're in a deep state of at-one-ment. You feel deeply at one with everything around you. And with this comes also a natural spontaneity. It just happens. You just shot that crumpled up piece of paper at the basket, didn't even think about it, but you were at least had done that enough times to develop the skill of knowing how the physics of your arm work with the spatial environment. And that time it went in, no look, into the basket. And that was a flow state. That was actually at the edge of your ability, and you did it without thinking, and so that freed up the brain to have the most processing power available to be able to just do the thing. This is how the human being is tuned to be able to act naturally, and this is something that we don't practice and cultivate as much as we used to.
I wonder,
have to, because we had to survive.
I wonder,
we weren't as comfortable as we are now.
I wonder if in like extreme circumstances, like like something terrible is happening, or like I don't know, something big is falling at you, and in this split second, I wonder if that's an immediate induction of flow state, like how somehow you can just jump out of the way and be fine, or like you fall off something and you land on your feet perfectly and you're fine.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so the body knows how to turn it on and off at will.
Yeah, it's like the brain kind of does, like, when it's like, oh no, this is going to be bad. Flow state immediately. Either that or there's nothing we can do and it blacks you out. That's the other end of it. When something really bad happens, your brain sometimes shuts you off and is like, nope.
Yeah. So we learned, like the shaman, he's describing the shaman. There's all this metabolic energy being used, yet it feels effortless. So the basketball player doing the complicated maneuver to be able to perform the task before the buzzer goes off, for instance, got to shoot a 3-pointer, and it's going to be a complex series of movements. He could think about every little thing he's got to do and what would happen if he doesn't succeed, and all the pressure and everything, and have his brain just all this processing being used up. where he can free up all that processing, just utilize the skills that he has, and naturally let the thing happen come what may. And since it's a high level of challenge, it's a championship game, for instance, his body just jumps into the task at hand and he does it. He sinks the shot, swoosh. That's flow state. The effortlessness comes about when people are training to such a degree that they have the mindfulness to be able to pull off something like that in that environment, in that circumstance. So the flow states, repeated improvisation is a really good way of staying in it. So rock climbing, jazz music, things like that help you learn how to move effortlessly from one pattern to the next. And the experience of flow itself, when people have it, is like a cascade of insights. Well, this is a state of being as well, as we learn later in the series. That, like Buddha, the awakened one, not only did he feel a deep sense of awareness of everything that was happening in his consciousness around him, and of understanding, immediate understanding and access to other people and deep complex problems. He always had a wise answer to help you get to the kernel of it. He also had a deep sense of at one mint and natural flow with reality.
And in that sense, it's I guess the pinnacle point is called the super flow state, where you do have the
you recognize
overarching
this in people. Yeah, we love this. We call people stars that exhibit this because they're really good at embodying this higher state, this flow state.
Well,
they shine bright.
Yeah, and that's the shaman. That is the wizard. In the wizard's greatest magics, you don't see them hardly expending any energy at all. Yet it happens effortlessly. And certain techniques were developed by the shamans.
It's like psychologically effortless, even if the body is using a great deal of strain to complete the task. Yeah.
And so these shamans are like the inventor pioneers of psychotechnologies to induce flow state experience, and not just the way that they can experience themselves, but is also shareable with the people who are, like, say, participating in this sense of like watching, because watching is a participatory thing. You're watching them do this, and your little mirror neurons are going and firing, and you're doing it too.
You're understanding that what the feat that they just accomplished is great, because you know how hard it is for the body to do that, because you inhabit a human body. Your mirror neurons are firing, and there's things that they're doing that you can't do, and that's why you get the sense of awe and wonder, like, how the heck did they pull that off? That's amazing. I have a human body too, and I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, right.
To nearly that level of finesse and grace.
If I tried to do that, I'd be turned into a pretzel. That was I was talking to Mr. Bill today about break dancers. He's like, "Oh my God, like I couldn't do that. When I was young, I couldn't even do that. What's going on with that?" It's like, and it seems effortless when these guys are just spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. State. Yeah.
So we learn mindfulness increases access to the flow state, and now we're trying to understand, why does it improve cognition here in episode 2? It helps us train ourselves to break the frame with ever-increasing novel challenges. And you get that cascade of insight, so it primes our insight faculty that we have. And that light bulb moment can be drawn out into ever greater understandings and encapsulations. And
instead of aha,
life
it's
can become an aha. That's the invitation of awakening. That all the non-duals, from the Sufis to the Advaita Vedantists to the Buddhists to the Christian mystics and so on and so forth, are inviting us into, is a constant aha with life. That can occur for all of us, and we get these brief glimpses into that experience. And 40% of the population, and one of the recent episodes, I think part 11 actually, the one we're about to go into, Vervaeke talks about, people have had these higher state of consciousness experiences. And what a grace it is that we can have this. It's like a communion with the universe and with the substratum of reality, and then something that transcends all of us and holds everything at once. But that's a whole other conversation. Yeah. So we've developed our intuition for noticing patterns And this intuition helps us stave off ideological possession. We've developed actual neurology for being able to help us understand the difference between correlation versus causation in our environments. We can
Yeah.
utilize
And
this.
that's the trick, is understanding what is the cause, what is the
Yes, not
because,
just
what is being the cause of
seems to be the
something.
cause because it correlates,
Yeah.
because it happened at the same time or something. Doesn't mean it's the actual
Well,
cause.
my cow died when the sun went down, so the sun going down killed my cow.
Yeah, right. That's good.
Yeah, well, no, like,
No, it's
no,
just
your
when the
cow
cow
died
died
when the sun went
because
down because a coyote came when the sun went down and ate your cow. But
yeah, or
you
it
know,
was the mold in the feed that you've been feeding
yeah,
them for the past
yeah.
3 weeks.
Correlative before causative, or excuse me, causative instead of correlative, and
Hmm.
we struggle with this all the time
We've
now.
struggled with this for thousands of years, and we still struggle with
Oh
this.
yeah, well,
And oh my God, we become ideological over this one too. I mean, we get into our groups over different ways of looking at this or that virus, for instance. God forbid you even say the word when you're putting something on
or
social
even
media
like
nowadays.
the oppressed versus oppressor narrative. It's like, well,
Okay.
yes, oppression and being oppressed has been a thing, but you can't just say everything is because of either being oppressed or oppressing.
No.
They happen alongside, but
Yeah.
it's like,
That's like a misinterpretation of Darwin all over
well,
again, almost.
good
Because
thing.
Darwin, in his book, The Origin of Species, mentions symbiosis and talks about the symbiosis between the different organisms more than anything about survival of the fittest, which is a component of how we develop and how evolution works. But it's
Well,
also, there's this underlying interrelation between all of the species. There's symbiosis that
so,
organisms can achieve with their environments. They don't want to
but
entirely kill off something because they need to be in a marriage with it to survive,
but
and that's
yes,
something that
but
nihilists have taken on.
but bringing it back to, and I'm not gonna get too far into the oppressed versus oppression narrative, but what I'm gonna say about it is the best things can happen under horrible circumstances. You wouldn't say those good things happen because of the horrible circumstances, and the worst things can happen within good circumstances. It's important for us to be able to parse out why something actually happens.
Sure.
What caused it? What was being the cause of it, opposed to, well, they just happened at the same time. And that will help us get a better understanding, say, like, of what oppression and oppression oppression is, because really nowadays who's oppressing you the most is yourself. And even like you were reading the Gulag Archipelago, and people could still
If you
have themselves even in the worst circumstances.
Yeah.
And I say this as an empowering thing, not as a dismissive thing. This is,
one thing that we
you
can do
have
is
more
understand
power than
how
you know.
systems interrelate. Systems thinking is really helpful in this. To understand that everything is interrelated.
Yes.
It's not just oppressor and the oppressed. This is
No.
what Darwin was getting.
And it's
Darwin was getting as well.
way
There's
more
actually
complicated than
really
oppressor or
complex
oppressed.
symbiosis going on through these different species that are helping them prime this ecology for them to thrive. And learning how to thrive together is really very much what the humans can task ourselves with now. If we want to give ourselves something meaningful to be a part of, that is going to be helpful and useful and is absolutely necessary right now. There's
Do you want
a billion and one ways to get involved with this work.
And do you want to be the cause of something terrible, or do you want to be the cause of something great?
Yes.
We can be the cause. The power is with us. We have these technology. We have the brain that is capable of these psychotechnologies within us.
Yeah.
We just need to remember them.
Yes. Yes, we do. Yes. So we've developed these capacities for the flow state and the implicit learning capacity. A lot of what looks like psychic abilities is actually our ability to pick up implicitly on complex patterns in the environment. So naturally, within us already, automatically, we are picking up on complex patterns in our environment all the time. We learn this is what our intuition actually is.
Yeah, you mentioned the psychic. Like, the idea of a psychic isn't somebody who's magical. It's somebody who's really, really, really good at picking up on those hidden, maybe not hidden, but like those subtle patterns that other people don't pick up on. And then they can tell you all about your own life because really you're telling them with subtle patterns.
Yes. Other
And
things that we
that's
implicitly learn is like how close you should stand to somebody in any given
sure, yeah.
situation, and how to act in any given situation or different rooms and different environments. So these are
Yeah.
things that become implicitly learned automatically. We're
Mm.
not thinking about the fact that we're learning them. We just
Mm.
automatically learn
And
them
it's
and
kind of
inhabit them.
magical that we can do that,
Hmm.
and we can just move and flow with each other
It's not all
and
good
read
though.
each
Yeah,
other.
because some implicit learning, like the bigot, has
Yeah.
got intuitions about races that are wrong.
Yeah.
There are many patterns in the world that are illusory, lots of spurious correlations. The bigot has picked up on correlational patterns, not causal ones. Science
Hmm.
is a way of distinguishing causal patterns from correlational
Hmm.
patterns.
And actually, I'd like to further the term of bigot too, because
Thank you
it
again to
goes.
Mark Mulvey for summing up these
Yes,
episodes.
so it goes. Bigotry, the way I see it, goes even further than just race, but it's having a causal assumption about any group of people and applying that to an individual,
Hmm.
and refusing to change your opinion when proved otherwise.
Yeah,
That's the main component for
yeah,
bigotry with me.
yeah.
You've been proved otherwise, but you'll still hold on to this. And you can have scientific bigots, like there's just like, no, my theory
Well,
is
that's the
right.
possession of the side of the ideologies. They're
Yeah.
not able to input
Yeah.
new information. They're
Yes.
not willing to change and
Yes.
upgrade their belief
Hmm.
system. They are dogmatically believing in something
Yeah.
in a very forceful way and
Hmm.
defending it beyond the point of logic.
And we're most familiar
Because
with.
it's like a defense mechanism
Yeah.
that people take part
Well,
in.
sure, and
And we
like.
are all able to like easily can succumb to this. We can all fall victim to this.
Well, yeah, and like to a certain extent,
It's hard not to.
the recognizing in group and out group is a
Mhm.
kind of a safety mechanism, but when proved otherwise through these
The ways that
techniques
we
and rituals that we
blanket
have to get over,
stereotype, yeah,
and we have rituals which are psychotechnologies to be able to get over that,
get over that.
and
Well, just the
we
fear of
should,
the stranger.
yeah,
Yeah, but when you develop like an enemy archetype of another
yeah,
group because you've stereotyped them with such
sure,
blanket
like
generalizations
like
for so long,
like a
you're not seeing the
derangement
individuals
syndrome,
anymore. So now
yeah,
you're working yourself up to being willing to even utilize violence
sure,
or threats of violence at least against people to try and get them to conform to your way of seeing, but you're not willing to see or understand why they believe what they believe.
hmm and
That's a problem.
yeah,
We got to understand each other's value orientations.
hmm
Where do we get our beliefs from? What are the values? Because once you understand somebody's values, which are relatable, then you can understand why they're believing what they believe, and you can help, and they can help you understand what you might be missing from their point of view, and you can also help them understand. Well, here's what we're seeing over here. Have you taken this into account? This is the conciliatory process. This is not so popular amongst politicians nowadays or in our media nowadays or by any great leading examples of anything in any
Well,
system of authority
yeah, I'd hate
nowadays.
to say not even within our university academic system either.
Everyone's othering each other.
It's
Yeah,
because, well,
everyone's
I
othering
even
everyone.
noticed this when I was, young and thinking about, okay, I got to go to college. I'm getting out of high school, but I saw the deep-seated bigotry of the elitist academic
Hmm.
mindset, and I won't say necessarily community, but what it was turning into.
Yeah.
Because like growing up as a young man, say get out of high school, be talking when you talk with people, and then be like, "Oh, are you going to school here? What are you studying?" And then when you tell them like, "Nah, like ain't that," they're like, "Oh," and they just immediately dismiss everything because you haven't gotten that degree. That, in my mind, also is a weird hybrid species of bigotry.
That's a form of implicit learning that's not useful.
Yeah,
and
it's
that's
like,
not
well,
accurate. Yeah.
if you didn't go to college, then you shouldn't be talking about these things, which is obviously bullshit. Because some of the greatest thinkers on the planet didn't go to college, whereas some of the stupidest people I know have PhDs.
Hmm.
Very, very smart people, but couldn't figure their way out of a paper bag.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. So we developed science and ration basically as ways of distinguishing causality versus causation. And so we have flow, deeply enhanced cognition, placebo, self-healing. Then we have mystical experiences being meaning-making. They help us develop deep sense of meaning and meaningfulness. So we have these parts of the brain talking to one another, enhanced insight and intuition. We have the capacity for metaphor, the capacity to reflect, and all of these things that I'm saying here are all metaphors. Reflect.
we
And
speak.
do you see
think,
my point?
Yeah,
Can you grasp that?
yeah.
We
Hey, can you
communicate through
hang on a
metaphor.
minute?
Yes,
You
and things
know?
that are
Yeah.
pervasive and profound are enhanced for us. So how we make creative connections between things is our capacity for insight and metaphorical thought. And we're utilizing this psychotechnology to then do things like track the moon and even develop capacities for soul flight and getting high. We're doing all these things to try and get overviews as well as taking deep dives to understand things. We're reflecting to correct and upgrade and improve ourselves. We're internalizing our literacy into metacognitive frameworks so that we're using language now in mass, lots of individuals, to solve great problems. Like, how can we build a pyramid? How can we govern ourselves together in a way that makes higher states of harmony in our environments with one another? So we start to internalize these capacities. We improve these capacities, exact, and then use them for something else. We develop coinage, money systems, abstract symbol systems. Now we're in episode 2 here. He's going through all of this, the mathematics that we begin to develop. And then we developed this capacity for reliable, accurate, logical ways of reflecting on our ideas and to checking things out and studying them and understanding how they work. And that radically upgraded the human species. But that raised awareness also raised awareness of our fallibility, our human fallibility, and how we're the cause and effect of many of our problems, our own problems. It's not just the gods, it's us. It's us. It's not just the gods that made a storm. It's us that weren't ready for the storm.
Well, that's a
We saw the clouds coming, and or that kind of whatever
that's a
example
very
you want to make there. But we
a
start to realize our personal
yeah, it's a
responsibility,
very sharp
and we start to develop morality.
what would you call it? A not evolution, but like growth stage shift of understanding. Instead of the world being a cruel place and just bad things happen to you and the world's not fair, which is an important understanding. It now at this level, we're at the understanding of, oh no, I also do have a part to play in this.
Yes.
So there's a personal responsibility
Yes.
end of things, which then you can look into somebody else and see their personal responsibility, and that's holding somebody to their potential, if you will. Now we have this point where we can really see something in other people as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the rituals or some of the rituals we use for that are like acclaim for people who have done great things and celebrations for people we very much enjoy, or like a celebrated leader that we really really like.
Yes.
So now there's like a
Ways
way
of
we can
celebrating these
show our
ideals.
appreciation
Yes.
for living up to a high responsibility.
Living up to these ideals.
Because if you live up
yes.
to that response, like you yourself and the other person live up to it, it makes things better. So now we can recognize that and celebrate it.
So we just start discovering ways that are optimal for human relation. We celebrate them. We admire them when we see them because we recognize them as suited for that help us in a survival situation. Somehow we know intrinsically that this leader embodying this mode of honor is really good for us. It feels good to be around that honorable human
When
being.
it seems
well,
like
we
this
know they're
is-
trustworthy. We know they're reliable. We know they're honest and authentic.
And this seems to be the starting point. So
It's the upper Paleolithic
the
transition.
it's like the starting point of where our hero stories, where our our stories start is from this era,
Our
like
story making
where we
does
start
here. Yeah,
where we
to
start
develop
like
complex
making our
societies.
heroes and making these people we look up to, and,
Yeah.
and creating a story of how they gain their insights and
Yeah.
what insights, and to share these using
So all the way
language
back, and we don't
and-
know exactly, but around 10,000 BC, agriculture, we start to stay in one place more often. Complex societies, the stories, the myths start to be able to be made. We have the time to actually pull it off, and so our ways of relating with our social community change drastically. And I think that pretty well covers. Let me see here on Mark's notes.
Thank you, Mark.
Got through the flow state, how pervasive metaphor is, Metaphorical cognition is at the heart of both science and art. Metaphorical thought allows us for greater problem solving ability. If you're a hunter gatherer group that has a shaman, you're going to outcompete the group that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. We understood oversight, supervision, the little echoes of shamanic flight. And nowadays, we also recognize Bronze Age civilizations are not as relevant to us.
Yeah.
But the Bible, Plato, Buddha, or Confucius are somehow still relevant or more relevant. And why is that? It's because something happened around 800 to 300 BCE. There was a great change. There was a collapse. And as Western, that was very formative of us. And this is known as the Axial Age. The fall of the Bronze Age is the greatest collapse of human civilization the world has ever known. The fall of the Roman Empire was nowhere near as devastating. It's the closest thing to apocalypse humans have experienced in recent known history. So, what seems to have been invented in one of the small tribal places that remained, Canaan, what is now, excuse me, what is now Palestine, I believe. Let me see.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, is a new kind of literacy.
Alphabetic.
Literacy. So we got into literacy, alphabetic, and then we got into metacognition, being aware of your own thinking, and then second order thinking when you internalize the psychotechnology into your metacognition to allow you to improve or correct your own thinking. This emerges because of alphabetic literacy.
Yeah, and alphabetic literacy is far easier to learn than like what do you call it, idiomatic, like or like image based,
Yes.
like symbols, which you would have to have like scribes learn all the different symbols. Whereas now, like say in English, you have 26 of them, and then you can start to put them in words. They're easily learnable, so more people can become literate, more people can participate. You bumped something. Is that still going? Just making sure.
Yeah.
But more people can participate in what's the best word for it? Participate in these practices and rituals and behaviors, thus enhancing the distributed cognitive network even more,
Mm-hmm.
and getting more people in it, and then it's compounding. It's multiplies
We don't even understand.
exponentially.
Yeah, we don't understand how much power we're wielding at any moment because of all of human history that
Mm-hmm.
came before that gave us what we have now,
Yeah.
from our language to our technology. I really like this idea of metacognition, of being aware of our own thinking that only really started to become really super salient for us. Like we become aware of our own thinking when we developed alphabetic literacy. We started to think in words. We weren't aware of our thinking before then. This is very much when the bifurcation must have
Mm-hmm.
begun, where we started to develop these attachments to our egoic sense of self and this disconnection with reality that we've been trying to get back ever since.
Mm-hmm.
A sense of one world of interaction that Vervaeke describes in episode we'll get to here shortly. So, yeah, second order thinking, when you internalize the psychotechnology into metacognition to allow you to improve, correct your own thinking, this emerges because of alphabetic literacy. We develop coinage and money, and this teaches us to be able to think in abstract symbols. And it also teaches us numeracy. And then these psychotechnologies, these training skills, are ready for acceptation, and they can be used to deceive us. They can also be used to empower us. And the Dhammapada states, here's a great quote: "There is no enemy greater than your own mind, but there is no ally greater than your own mind." Well, okay, let me say that again. There is no enemy greater than your own mind, but there is no ally greater than your own mind. Self-deception leads to self-destruction. Self-correction leads to self-transcendence. So that's beautiful. So we learned about how we as humans developed methods of psychotechnology to be able to allow us to conform better to our realities in a rapidly changing age.
And we keep
Technologies are creating new challenges, and then we're creating new
yeah,
software
and
development,
we
psychotechnologies to adapt.
and we what's the term for like using the tongue not just for tasting poison, It's on the tip of my tongue. Um,
Exacting.
Thank you.
The brain's
Exacting
capacity to
pre-existing
exact.
psychotechnologies and then enhancing them. So like literacy and being able to write things down were a previous psychotechnology, but then we enhanced that with alphabetic literacy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's not just always coming up with something new, but optimizing it and
Yes,
modifying
yes. Because the previous literacy
things.
was cumbersome, and you had to memorize hundreds of thousands of symbols in some cases.
Or how arbitrary tick or seemingly
Track at
arbitrary
least.
tick
Yeah.
marks work, or
Mm-hmm.
like and whereas
Alphabetic, which was phonetic, which is something
hmm
that we can hear and we can relate the C
hmm
sound with this sound and
hmm
so forth.
yeah.
Simplifies things so a larger number of people can utilize it. And then a larger number of people thinking in terms of alphabetic literacy allows us to wrestle with more and more complex thoughts. We start to
Yep.
realize our self responsibility. We start to develop moral systems. And we start to get the civilizations that we can remember in history now.
And the development of money and the psychotechnology that goes with money is almost like an acceptation of the original metaphor
Mm-hmm.
psychotechnology, because
Yes,
money is just a metaphor
for sure.
for uh, value.
Yeah. Now we created symbol metaphors.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So now like
Like coinage and
that coin can now be a metaphor for a lot of things. Maybe a chicken, or
yeah.
maybe some goats, or maybe some bread, or something else like that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not the chicken, the goat, or anything like that. It's a placeholder metaphor for various potentials
Yeah. Yeah, for
and
sure.
in an amount.
All right.
Um,
So let's get on to episode 3, and I'm getting a feeling that we might only make it through the
yeah,
first like
it's
3 or 5.
yeah, it's 11 o'clock. So
Let's try and make it. Can we do 5? You think?
Yeah, if we take a little quick breather, after 3, or
Let's see where
no,
we're at after 3.
yeah,
Yeah, because maybe we'll just do the first 3 here, and then we'll do another recap another time, and we'll try and catch people up with where we're at.
maybe next week we'll do the rest of them and have a two-parter
Two-part
recap. It wouldn't be as long as if we didn't have the breakdown of the system and all that stuff that happened.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had to present, and we talked for a little while with our kind of just our own impressions of the times that we're in and what this stuff means to us, just kind of loosely dancing
Yeah.
around it. Because you do have to kind of create an entrance for people into this.
Sure.
Why are we interested in this awakening from the meaning crisis that this guy John Vervaeke is putting on? Well, I feel it gets to the crux of answering the greatest crises we as a species face in mass and as individuals in the times that we're in right now. And what the gentleman Vervaeke has done here is something of great service to us. So it's very exciting and heartening, and it's been very healing and consoling to discover in this time of the pandemic and shutdowns and
Well, it sure
all
beats
of
being
the
angry.
cultural wars going on and the partisan politics ramping up and getting increasingly inflammatory, and the wars going on between Russia and Ukraine, and
And the increasing level of nihilism within the youth.
not to mention the inflation on top of that, and desperation in people, and all these things that
And
get us all
excess
worried.
deaths, and the meteor might be coming around
Is anybody
Jupiter,
trying to
you
do
know?
anything about it? Well, yeah, actually, there's a lot of people trying to do
Yeah,
something about it, and
there
there's some
are.
people that are getting quite comprehensive with really helping give us a very exact idea of why we got to where we are and how we can get out of it as well, that have been noticing these things building for some time now. So
Yeah.
we very thankfully have people like Vervaeke and Daniel Schmachtenberger, and I would say Jordan Hall, and I would say Jordan Peterson, and so many other people recognizing from various different angles. Even if some are abrasive, you got to hear them out. Listen to Dave Chappelle.
Well,
Listen to what people are talking about right now that are coming across as offensive to some, but also very deeply meaningful to others. What are they saying that is true? And we should look from across the ideological spectrum, from Trump to Bernie Sanders. You should look and go beyond those people. Go far beyond all of the different popular icons, and and see where your family and friends are thinking, and then see where you are thinking after you look from multiple perspectives, and try and take everything apart that you believe. Be willing to. We
Well,
want to know it's
and don't be
true.
so damn afraid to be
Yeah,
wrong.
it's okay to be wrong.
It's
No,
actually better. It's better that
it's
if you
great to be
spend
wrong.
most of your time being wrong,
It's really good to
so
know
you
where
can
you're
work
wrong.
through
Yeah.
it. You know,
Yeah, we should
that's
always be looking for where we're wrong, and putting ourselves in situations where we're going to make
well,
mistakes so we can learn where to be.
well, because if
You
you're
know?
consistently, if say an individual or a group of people are consistently wrong, then you have a systematic error, which is important to understand what that is. Like what we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about last episode with, the candy thing and the kids and the candy.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you take candy and 4-year-olds and you line out the same amount of candy in one line with short spaces and the other amount of candy in another line with wider spaces, the 4-year-old, knowing that there's only 5 pieces of candy in each, will still pick the pile that is bigger.
Sure.
And you don't throw out that error being like, oh, well, those are just errors. No, that's a systematic error. What does that tell you? So if
Right.
you're always messing up or you're wrong consistently, there might be a systematic error that you can address and understand. But you have to be wrong first before you know what actually is right, in my opinion. I could be wrong about this, but I think we learn very well through.
But see, you just saying I could be wrong
Yeah.
is that willingness that you're trying to say. This is what we should
Well,
embody.
and sometimes it hurts.
This is what we can embody.
And it's earth-shattering.
This is comforting.
Yeah.
This is actually more comforting
Yeah.
than
Yeah,
being in
well.
a state of super certainty.
Yeah.
That super certainty is very closed off. And
It's also
not
very
taking in new
fragile as
information.
well,
It's actually it's going to ossify. It's going to become fragile and brittle itself.
It's a tiny pane of
It's
glass
not
on
able
the tip
to
of a
adapt.
finger.
It needs new information. So we should constantly be challenge ourselves with new information, challenge our beliefs, find out if it rests on something that is true and good for one and all. I love Buddha's advice on this. Don't believe anything just because many people believe it and say it to be true. Don't believe anything just because your authorities say it to be true. Don't believe anything because your teachers, your parents, your gurus, anybody says it to be true. Only believe it once you have looked into it for yourself, deeply investigated it, and found it to be true for one and all.
Mm-hmm.
Should we believe in it and live up to it? That's the way. And that's a paraphrasing of what Buddha says, but that's the idea right there. And that's actually the scientific method as well. We realize that if we're willing to challenge our own beliefs over and over and over again, we're going to get as close to an approximation of a good way to interact with our reality as we're going to be able to get. And that's useful, that's good, that feels good, and it's helpful to other people, and it puts you in a state
And
of
within the scientific method,
flow and accord once again. Yeah.
you don't prove your theory. Your theory is only good if it cannot be disproved.
Yes.
So you have to
so it's reliable. It may
Yeah.
not be exact, but it's the best we got so far. And that's
Yeah.
what we're constantly doing as human
Yeah.
beings, is constantly calibrating ourselves to our environment to better be able to actuate ourselves, actualize in this world what we want to be able to have. And what do we want to be able to have nowadays? We should decide together. This is the time for us to get into engagement with one another. We should engage in conversation and engage in these great existential crises that face ourselves and our entire species right now. We have great debates to get through, and we should be, I think, approaching them in a state of like side by side, let's figure this out together, instead of face to face, I'm against you and my ideas against yours. And
well, discussion opposed to a debate.
we should be able to steelman each other's arguments,
like well,
and rephrase each other's arguments to each other to a point to where you're like, yeah, that's a good summation of what I believe. I would stand by that way of expressing it. And if we understand each other's arguments and each other's value orientations, then we can understand, okay, what's going to work best as a conciliation between if we're seeing things a little bit differently. But the more we understand each other, the more we're going to understand, like, as long as you understand value orientations, you can get very close to coming to some kind of way of solving most any problem that we can face together, even with viciously competing groups. We just don't understand each other's value orientations at all anymore, and we're not even interested. And the only way to have that kind of interest is to cultivate in people a curiosity and a care and an interest in one another, regardless of what somebody looks like or acts like or seems to believe. We've got to understand, we've got to have a loving orientation towards each other once again. We have to learn how to be unconditional in our nature, as Jesus and Buddha were trying to teach us thousands of years ago. We still have not quite grasped what these guys were telling us and been able
And
to
well,
embody it.
even before them, I still like. I think probably even back in the tribal end, we were still trying to do that, just on a much smaller scale
Yeah.
with each other too, because it wasn't
'Cause we
always just
discovered we
war and
have this
conflict. But
capacity.
yeah,
And so now we've just got to cultivate it further. But we have this capacity as human beings. It's our greatest saving grace, and it's probably our greatest superpower. It's what enables us to work together
it's probably one of our highest drives
in
as well.
concert in cognitive distributive networks to solve ever increasing problems, and do so in a way that's even joyous and it feels good. It's meaningful to ourselves when we're engaged on this level, in this high level of flow and attunement, the feedback is
It
great.
lightens you up. It's almost
It's
enlightening.
It is enlightening.
Not just enlightening,
It's so
but
cool that it's built into us
enlightening.
biologically to feel good when we're in the optimal state. It's like
Yeah.
that's a yes cue that you're getting from your physiology that's saying, yes, this is the way that I best operate. Keep doing that. And I'll keep giving you this good endorphins.
Oh, and your brain has
You're feeding
great
yourself
chemicals
well.
that feeds itself
Yeah,
when you
you're
do it too.
sleeping
You're just
well.
like, oh yeah.
I like these practices you're engaged in. I like how well you're dancing with everything and everyone around you. You're not resisting anything. You're always adapting to.
Well, that
you're
is-
responding rather than reacting.
That's good conversation, and I think like the conversation aspect that people involved with the meaning crisis and the meta crisis and all that, I think that's where it's at. And if we can, individually cultivate an environment that is conducive to conversation and not debate, because debates are important, but there's something different. Because a conversation is between two or three people to come to a greater understanding. A debate is two people trying to convince a group of other people about their point.
A debate should be like a side event in the overall greater project.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're trying to figure out something great, and then two people have two really good competing ideas. Okay, you guys are going into the debate ring now, and then everyone gathers around to see, okay, let's watch these ideas compete. We're not caring about who wins. We're caring about what wins, because we're trying to find what's good and true for one and all.
And a
If we
conversation
get our
is,
egos out of the way of this process, this thing becomes fun.
if a debate is like a bout, like a boxing match.
Yeah, don't be attached to your
A
ideas.
conversation is like a dance.
Yeah, why are we so attached to our ideas? We're not our ideas.
Well, because it's scary when
Their ideas are just illusions.
when it falls
They're
out from
metaphors.
underneath you.
Everything's metaphors.
But
and
what's
it's
the
beautiful.
meta? What's the meta for?
It's right? It's beautiful that we have metaphors, but everything is metaphors.
And actually, I think I
And
figured
we're
that
all
out.
getting out of shape over a bunch of ideas and why do we have to preference ideas? What if we just let ourselves be guided by love? It's so friggin' simple. It's hilarious that it runs that deep. But let's wrestle with episode 3 real fast and then see where we're at, and then maybe we'll take a break or we'll end the episode.
it's already 11:20. I'd almost say let's come back fresh with 3 through 10 next
3 through
week.
10. Okay.
We
next week.
we can do it with a head start and not be an hour behind because the computer, we're blaming it on the computer.
Yeah, but we also tend to blab and go on awesome tangents.
Well, we'll try to get through
So-
3 through 10, but I'm turning into mush right now.
Well, we've been going
Oh God.
for about 2 hours now on this session, and we talked previously for 50 minutes before we realized that the stream had crashed, and so we have no record of any of that.
Well, I
for
guess you guys are going to have to join us
Sorry.
for recap number 2.
You might be able to catch it if you catch it fast, but I'm going to end up deleting if anything is saved on YouTube.
Oh
or
yeah, no,
deleted
it's on
from
YouTube, and
Facebook.
it's just going to be
It's
confusing.
only like 10 minutes or so I'll end up deleting that.
Yeah.
So yeah, this has become a recap episode. We were going to get into episode 11, but we realized we wanted to do some recapping.
And then
And
the
so
powers
we-
of the universe went blue and turned everything off, and was
It's-
like, I guess we're doing it.
Reflections. Maybe we'll call them reflections.
Yeah,
Reflections on episode 1 and 2, and then maybe we'll do more reflections and catch ourselves up to where we are now.
Well, I think we did a pretty good reflection of what the meta crisis means for us now in this episode, which I think has been important because, like, going through this lecture series, we've been, keeping up with the lectures, but I think it's important
Yeah, to even
to
trying to
gauge where we're at
where
within
we're
this
at, and then like
crisis.
I'm trying to figure out like how can I word this for you all, for people out there to
Yeah,
understand that this is really good stuff. This is really
yeah,
important
yeah.
for us to wrestle with right now.
Well,
It's for all of us. I don't know human being on the planet that would not be captivated by some
I think this is
aspect
probably
of Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series or this larger project and the
mhm.
understandings that it involves.
I think it's
It's,
probably the most important thing that we can do as a species right now is regain the ability to find meaning,
yeah,
like true
absolutely.
deep meaning.
Isn't that an
You
exciting
know.
project when you hear it
Well,
too?
it's attainable too.
It's
It's
attainable.
not like
No, no, no.
trying to get
We've
off the
done this.
planet and travel at the
We've
speed
done
of
this
light.
thousands of
It's
times over. In
yeah,
fact, this is what we specialize at. In
yeah.
fact, we specialize at this story making to such a degree that at this point we are biologically tuned genetically to
Mm,
think in story. We
yes,
think and talk in stories. And so we have this capacity to understand
mm,
in a story making fashion. And
yes.
so yeah, our old stories have been challenged and they're all competing with one another and now they're intermeshing. Even as they've clashed, they're intermeshing now as well. And we're learning how to interlink these profound understandings of self transcendence that mystics before have realized. And they're bringing back to us over and again from the ages past. And we can recapitulate them now in our world today. And we can better understand what they were getting at, why they were getting at it, and how we think, how we got to where we are, all of that. Vervaeke, as a scientist, is is a great guide for this process,
Mm.
and I'm very excited to be able to share with all of you. And I thank you, brother, for taking part in this with me.
Yeah, it's good.
And
It gives it helps with the existential dread.
yeah, well, I thought it might. I thought it might,
Yeah.
man, because I know it had helped me tremendously to have discovered this series um, a few years ago, and then while I was going through it, then the coronavirus began, and all this stuff that's been happening that is endemic of the
Mm,
social discord happening in the world today, right now.
yeah.
Um, it's continually heating up and accelerating and seeming to grow. You know, and I noticed since I was a kid, I feel like since I was an adolescent, at least like a teenager, I felt like we've been building towards some kind of climax as a species for a long time now, and we're in the midst of some kind of climactic point in our human story. I felt that when I was young and
It's the
understood that
singularity,
because it was
man.
that global understanding that we all have nukes, and then we had seen ourselves from the moon. We know that we're all one on this planet together, but we also have the potential to destroy the whole thing. And so there's this huge choice facing the human species. I also noticed when I was young that nobody agrees on how we got here, what we're doing, why are we alive, what is existence. No one agrees what is the best stuff I can find. And I found it in science and I found it in spirituality.
Yeah.
And I find them both teach not just what the world is made of in the terms of science,
Mm-hmm.
materialistic science, what are things made of and how do they fit together, but how to be in this world.
Mm-hmm.
How can we best manage ourselves together?
Mm-hmm.
What things bring out our greatest characteristics and help to optimize our greatest talents and can bring us into ever higher levels of coordination and peace and accord with one another?
So
This is the stuff that fascinates me because I'm like, how else to be comfortable in a world like this?
so science would be the what is it made out of, and then spirituality, if you will, would be well, what what do you make of it?
What
How
do
do
you
you
make of it? That's
what do you
great.
make of it
Yeah,
instead of what is it made of? What do you
yeah.
make of it,
And why?
and
Yeah.
why?
What do you make of
Yeah,
it? Yeah, yeah,
it's like
yeah. What do you make of it?
well, you make
Why are we
you
here?
make meaning you as best as you can over and over and over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it retains its mystery. It's a great mystery, but we know that there's threads through it, like love feels good, it
Mm-hmm.
feels true, and it puts us in a
Even when it's
state of accord. Yeah.
even when the emotional response within love is less than good feeling, like say when somebody dies, going through the
Mm.
sorrow, that's still of love. It's still there's something in it that is good, even though it can drive you
You
to
can
have
trace it
deep
back to
pain.
the source of the
It can
pain.
still
Well, yeah, the pain is because something that was so worthy of love has been lost to
Well,
us.
every good love story has its
But
tragic
it was
moment, you know.
so, but yeah, but it was so worthy of love.
Yes,
It's so worth
yes, yeah.
celebrating,
What's that
even
line?
if it's not here anymore.
Better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all.
Hmm.
That's romantically speaking, but I think it is applicable in the sense of the overarching what love is.
Yeah.
And I think probably like the greatest hell you could possibly be in is to not just not feel the
Hmm.
love, but totally resent it.
Yeah. And love is something
You
you don't
know,
need to have even a relationship with a significant other, for instance, to
no,
experience the highest levels of love. The
no.
highest levels of love happen in the worst places sometimes with military
Mm-hmm.
overseas. Um, and so that would be the warrior perspective. But love happens in so many ways, shapes, and forms throughout our life. And we can experience a love of life itself that helps us make an art of life and give to life in like a sort of a service that puts you in this state of reciprocal dance with interrelation with
Well,
life,
we can be
where
in
it's
it.
responding to you and you're
Um,
responding to it, and we can help breathe a little bit more light into a dark world.
yeah.
And that's continually what we get to do as
And somebody might ask, well, why would you want to do that? Well, it's better than not.
I don't know. It's because
It's
I'm
just better than
made
not,
up of the
you know?
atoms that were birthed in the furnaces of stars, and we still want to burn bright, man. I
Yeah.
don't know what it is,
I think it's just
but
it's
it's
better
cool that
to than not to, because
to be or not to be,
I've done
right?
the not doing this, you know, gathering meaning and living in love in that, and that kind of sucked. So, you know, from a purely personal end of things, it feels better to help
Mm-hmm.
shine light in the darkness, even though some people
For
might yell at
certain.
you to turn that light off.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And a problem well stated is half solved. So understanding how we got here and why we're here is very helpful in navigating and orienting ourselves and giving us a sense of firmer ground. And then understanding how we can optimize ourselves in relation with this environment through mindfulness practices actually gives us a heroic journey to take on.
Sure, you
And
can
so
be.
now it's like, oh, this is really engaging.
Yeah.
And actually, wait, me doing this stuff really does affect the environment
Mm-hmm.
around me. And we really are writing this human story together. And we really do have a hell of a lot more power than we ever give ourselves credit for, because look, we're still using the ideas of like potential and action because of this guy Socrates. One
Mm-hmm.
dude, Socrates, Plato,
Mm-hmm.
or that was Aristotle that
It
came up
was,
with potential. Yeah, but Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Jesus, Buddha, Robin Williams,
well, let's not
Martin,
even.
Martin Luther King.
Let's bring
We
it
can
way
just go
back.
through lists of
Thalius.
singular humans that
You know,
embodied humanness in a beautiful, profound way that was very exciting, and we all embrace it because we recognize there's something
you know,
beautiful there that gives us a reason for being, that we actually have the potential to embody ourselves.
you could almost mark ages by their teachers. You know, like an age, like you know, you have different periods of time, and we call them ages. Like you know, the this last age we're in, at least in like Western society, the great teacher would be Christ.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, before that, in other ages, you had like, you know, like Abraham was a great teacher, and
Mm-hmm.
then, you know, like, and so like you'd have like, you know, the Aristotelian Platonic age of those teachers, but before that, you had like the natural philosophers like Thales age, and ages aren't necessarily a fixed time span, but like they change according to how we change. Like the
Mm-hmm.
Bronze Age didn't only last for a certain amount of time because, oh, well, that's how long it's going to last. It lasted for that period of time because, well, we got to a point and then we're at the Bronze Age. And it collapses. We're no longer at the Bronze Age.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not, you know, oh, there was a
Yeah,
set
it's
length
not
of
like,
time. It's like,
yeah,
no,
it's
like
not,
ages can be whatever. And
yeah,
I think
yeah.
teachers mark the age.
Mm.
If I was to most accurately try to describe like how we
There's the
differentiate
lingering
age.
effects, but yeah, it can't be an exact
Yeah.
drop off or ending.
'Cause
But
even
we
like-
we have useful enough approximations to delineate.
In like the industrial age, well, those teachers would be, you know, like
Is it
the
1850s or
Rockefellers and
late
the,
1800s, or
you know, the Rockefellers and the other ones that, you know, like they made these big things, had these big businesses, mass produced things,
mm-hmm.
You know, and sometimes we can have better teachers than others in different ages. You know, like I hate to, you know, well, the internet age, I'd like to think like of the John Vervaekes and the Jordan Petersons and all the really awesome people, and even like, you know, the Tim Pools and, you know, the topical societal ends of things. Those are the teachers, not necessarily the, you know, Zuckerbergs and the Kardashians, because like, you know, like this age could be marked by that end of things too. Like if it's a collapse, then we'll mark it by the degenerate teacher as opposed to the regenerative teachers.
That's a good
You
way to
know?
put it. Yeah.
And
God, how are you going to keep up with the history of these times? So
oh my
much is
god,
happening at once
no,
that and there's so many different power players to keep track of. There's so many interrelating threads of storylines that have been going on for a long time now. So it's going to be a lot for historians in the future to parse out. But I do feel like we're going through this time because it's just a natural part of the process. As we've gained an increasing technological capacity, we've generated increased networks of understanding, and we've become increasingly globalized. You know, it's radio, TV to newspaper to internet now, and we're further becoming now a global culture. So globalization is happening. We always knew globalization deep down was inevitable once we got to a certain point as a species, and we started to relate through at least the radio and started to know other
but
cultures.
now we have
We
the
begin to.
now we have the ability to do global cooperation opposed to
We've
global
known about
rule.
other cultures for thousands of years, but
Yeah,
it's sped up with the radio and
yeah.
then with the TV and yes, and then now with the internet, everything is sped up so much that the rate at which we're getting to know each other's deep and multi-thousand-year-old cultures has magnified, and it's shocking for all of us to see how different we are. And also, science is arguing with religion, and all the different religions are being held up to the standard of our time, and we're seeing some of the cultural baggaging of these old stories and spiritual systems, but we're missing the we're throwing the
We're
wheat and the chaff out. We're not
yeah,
keeping the wheat. There's actually some timeless wisdom
yeah.
from Jesus Christ and Buddha and Lao Tzu and so on and so forth. Like these guys were
Well,
spitting
even like
knowledge
look at Freud. You know, Freud had his issues, but he was still right about a lot.
a lot. Yeah. Well, we get a lot of our
You
framework for
know?
understanding now in the way we think from Freud and from Jung, and we don't even know it.
Yeah,
How
but
much it's dependent upon those that came before us. And it doesn't matter what sex somebody is, it's just Earth
yeah,
doing its thing. It's earthlinging out
yeah.
through various hominids. It's cool. We get to take part in it. Let's actually celebrate that fact instead of getting stuck on our own individual recognition and our concern over appearing right or wrong or on the right team or the right side. If you care about love and you care about one and all and us working together to create a better world for those that come after us, you're on the fucking right team as far as I'm concerned. And that's the name of the game that I see right now. Like, this is what is happening in the world. This is what we get to be engaged with in these times, and that's what makes them exciting. So this is also, it doesn't have to be depressing. It doesn't have to be anxious ridden. There's going to be those elements sometimes,
Yeah,
but you can always re-grasp, wait a minute, I get to be a part of one of the climaxes of human history. We are the writers to the story, and I get to help at least make the world around me a little bit lighter for those that I interact with. And that does echo out and ripple out. And we are changing the world with every little thing that we do constantly, whether we like it or not. There's that butterfly effect always happening. So don't doubt yourselves, guys, and don't doubt human beings' capacity for overcoming impossibilities over and again. It's what we've done. We're experts at this.
Yeah, we've set foot on the moon, man.
Yeah.
That's like,
We're so good at skirting the precipice. We're so good at being in the flow state because it's what has allowed us to survive up to now. And now we get to use that. We get to learn to use that capacity to be in ever higher states of concert and accord with one another. And so, yeah, on that note, I think it's a good time to wind it down.
have faith in yourself, guys.
This was a
You
good
can do it.
reflection on the series so far. Maybe we'll just do these here or there as we're able, and we'll say, let's see how many episodes we can get through as we. It'll
Yeah.
help us recapitulate our
Yeah.
understanding,
Yeah.
and we'll be keeping ourselves on track as we learn with Mr. John Vervaeke here and
Mm-hmm.
all of you out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in so much to this episode of Actuali Podcast. I've been Chris,
I've been DJ.
and we love you guys. We'll talk to you
Peace.
soon.